Happy Thanksgiving and welcome to Vicky's Neighborhood. I'm Stephanie, and today I'll be reading you Vicky's Thanksgiving. In this story, Vicky and her family go to Malibu, California to celebrate Thanksgiving with Grandpa Wilbur and Grandma Gertrude, Vicky's great-grandparents. So are you ready? Good, then let's begin now. It was a couple of days before Thanksgiving, and school let out early, which made Vicky and her friends happy. They were getting out of school on Tuesday so that Vicky and her family wouldn't happen to hit holiday traffic along the way. Before Uncle Jeff took Vicky, Janine, and Eddie home, he took them over to Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie's office for Vicky's checkup. "I can't wait to go see Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie," Vicky said. "Yeah, we know how much you love going to see Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie for a checkup. Isn't that right, Uncle Jeff?" asked Janine as Uncle Jeff's car slowed to a stop sign.
"Yeah, Janine, your Uncle Peter always wanted to be a doctor ever since he and I were kids,"
Uncle Jeff answered. Vicky, Janine, and Eddie were amazed. When she arrived at the office where Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie worked, along with Uncle Jeff, Eddie, and Janine, Vicky knew she hadn't been in there since she had a tummy ache after the Tabasco in the chili incident. "At least you don't have a tummy ache anymore, do you, Vicky?" asked Eddie. "I sure don't, Eddie," replied Vicky. Of course, Vicky remembered when she lay down on the examining table and lifted her shirt up. Her Uncle Peter would rub his hands together to make them nice and warm so Vicky wouldn't flinch. When Uncle Peter asked Vicky if she felt any discomfort, Vicky would nod her head and answer, "Mm-hmm." Vicky also remembered when her Aunt Lizzie gave her a cup of iced tea with pure honey, freshly cut up lemon, and a couple of ice cubes. When Vicky got inside the waiting room with Eddie, Janine, and Uncle Jeff, Vicky looked inside the fish tank and saw Biggie bobbing in the water, as he had done before. "Hi, Biggie, how are you today?" Vicky asked. Biggie blooped at Vicky 8 times, and it was the fish's way of saying, "I'm doing pretty good, thank you, Vicky." Vicky giggled slightly as she watched Biggie as he continued to bob in the water. "I'm excited about Thanksgiving," she told her uncle's favorite pet fish. "Bloop, bloop, 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 bloop." "Golly, I wonder what you said," Vicky mused. "He said that your Uncle Peter and I are bringing him along for our Thanksgiving Day vacation, Vicky," said a familiar female voice behind her. "Oh, hi, Aunt Lizzie," Vicky grinned. "Hi, sweetie," replied Aunt Lizzie. "Are you excited for Thanksgiving?" "Yes, Aunt Lizzie. I can't wait to go visit Great-Grandpa Wilbur and Great-Grandma Gertrude," said Vicky. Indeed, Vicky's great-grandparents, Wilbur and Gertrude Chandler, were still living and owned a beach house in Malibu. Vicky loved going to the beach every year during the summer. They were one of the places that Vicky loved visiting from June all the way towards the end of August. "Excellent, Niecy," Aunt Lizzie grinned as she picked Vicky up and carried her like a baby to her Uncle Peter's office. "Now come. Your Uncle Peter is expecting you." Even though Vicky wasn't at the time had a tummy ache since the same week she started her first day of school, she felt that she was starting to feel hungry, and that her tummy was about to rumble. What was going to be for lunch? Vicky asked herself. She wouldn't know until she got home, and maybe, just maybe, her Uncle Jeff had something planned for lunch. Maybe egg sandwiches and tomato tortellini soup? That sounds good. Just as her Aunt Lizzie set her down on the examining table, and Vicki could feel that her tummy was beginning to get pained with hunger, she saw her Uncle Peter saunter into his office like a cool male cat. "Meow," Aunt Lizzie purred when she saw her husband. "Hey, kitty girl," Uncle Peter laughed. "So you brought our favorite niece in?" "You know it, dear Wookie," Aunt Lizzie replied coyly. "Good, that's just what I wanted to hear," Uncle Peter chirped before he kissed his wife on the lips. Vicki pictured her Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie standing in the doorway, kissing underneath the mistletoe at Christmas time. Vicki remembered last Christmas when her family members came to her house, and she was in charge of welcoming them in. And Eddie was in charge of the coats, and of course Janine was in charge of the shoes and boots. Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie were the last to arrive, after they decided to bring their new pet fish, who was not too small but plump and cute. "Is that your new fish, Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie?" Vicki asked with a surprised smile. "Yes, Vicki," said Aunt Lizzie. "We stopped by at a pet store and found a fish that you and the rest of the kids, even your age, can see whenever you visit your Uncle Peter and I for a checkup, treatment, or anything like that." "Does it have a name?" Vicki asked. "No, but what do you think its name will be?" replied Aunt Lizzie. Vicki did her best thinking. "How about Biggie?" she suggested. Peter couldn't help but laugh. "Biggie," he mused, "considering the fact how big and plump he is." Vicki blushed and giggled. "Yes," she replied, bursting with such little girlish laughter. Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie loved the new name for their new pet fish, even though they thought it was a funny name. "Wake up, Vicki," Uncle Peter said aloud, interrupting Vicki's flashback. Vicki blinked once or twice. "Hi, Uncle Peter," she blushed as she snapped back to reality. "Hi, Niecy. So how are you feeling? How is your tummy? Any pain lately?" Uncle Peter asked. Vicki shook her head. "No, not since you and Aunt Lizzie treated it," she replied. "In fact, Uncle Peter, it's only hungry." "Good," Uncle Peter said. "But, my dear Niecy, we'll have you out of here in no time." Vicki nodded as she smiled at Uncle Peter, and Uncle Peter smiled back before he kissed her forehead. And so Uncle Peter proceeded into giving Vicki a checkup by having her step on the scale. He was very impressed with her weight and height. "Tell me, Vicki, do you exercise at school and at home?" Uncle Peter asked. "Yes, I do, Uncle Peter," Vicki replied. Uncle Peter gave her a thumbs up before he gently picked her up and took her back to the examining table. And just as before, Uncle Peter took her blood pressure, her pulse, her temperature, examined her eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, checked her reflexes, listened to her heartbeat and lungs, and lastly he pushed down gently on her tummy. Vicki took a deep breath as the pain of hunger remained. And just as before, Uncle Peter asked Vicki if he was hurting her tummy. She replied, "Not at all, Uncle Peter. Not at all. You're making it feel better." "I'm making it feel better?" asked Uncle Peter. "Yes," Vicki smiled. When Vicki's checkup was over, Uncle Jeff drove her and her siblings home, where they can eat lunch before hitting the road to go to Grandpa Wilbur and Grandma Gertrude's home in Malibu. Carol was already at home, and so was Martin. They had cut out of work earlier to pack up for their Thanksgiving Day trip. As Vicki was enjoying an egg sandwich, tomato tortellini soup, applesauce, and sea salt crackers for lunch, with a glass of almond milk, she thought about the adventure band poster that her Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie had in their office. She knew Aunt Lizzie was a fan of Reuben Jensen, Jeremiah Clark, Armand Parker, Noel Santos, Stefan Pearson, Graham Ryan, and Sean Abel. And the guys were like birds of a feather that flocked together. "Mama?" Vicki said before she could think. "Yes, baby," Carol replied as she picked up her glass of almond milk to take another sip. "Do you know when Adventure is performing? You know, Aunt Lizzie's favorite band," said Vicki before stuffing her mouth with crackers. "Well, as a matter of fact, sweetie pie, they are. But they aren't on stage until January 12th, answered Carol. "Are you interested in seeing them perform?" Vicki nodded yes, for her mouth was full. When everyone finished their lunch, it was time for them to hit the road and head off to Malibu to visit Grandpa Wilbur and Grandma Gertrude at their beach home. "Oh, I hope Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie bring their pet fish Vicki with them," Vicki said as she looked toward Uncle Peter and Aunt Lizzie's office from the window in the back seat. "Don't worry, Vicki. They would never leave their pet fish at home when they go away for the holidays unless they get a pet sitter," said Janine. "Yeah, if they're taking a trip to other countries, like Australia," Eddie agreed as he held the cat carrier containing Holly inside. "Meow," said Holly. "Australia," Vicki repeated softly. When Vicki was 5 years old, Vicki went to Australia after her 5th birthday. Vicki remembered when she went to the Australian Zoo and saw all kinds of animals, such as kangaroos and koalas. Vicki got a chance to hold a baby koala. She loved baby animals very much, and so did Janine and Eddie, who found a lost baby kangaroo and helped him find his mother. Everyone was very proud of Eddie for guiding him safely back to his mother. That the keepers of the zoo rewarded him with a Gold Coast medal. Eddie felt very proud to be a hero for helping the baby kangaroo back to his mother, and Vicki told her brother she was proud of him. "Thanks, sis," Eddie had replied. "I know that the baby kangaroo is safe again." Vicki even saw herself visiting one of the theme parks on the Gold Coast, where she's on one of the swings going around and around. She thought of Eddie going down the Super Tubes hydro coaster, and of course Janine petting a harmless boa at Paradise Country. "Hey, remember the song that we were taught in school before we were let out for Thanksgiving Day break?" Janine asked. "Yeah, I remember," Eddie replied. "Me too," Vicki said in agreement. And so Vicki and her siblings began to sing.
Over the river and through the woods to Grandmother's house we go. The horses away to carry the sleigh wide and drifting snow. Over the river and through the woods, oh how the wind is blow. It stings the toes and bites the nose. Over the ground we go.
Soon Vicki and her family arrived in Malibu, where Grandpa Wilbur and Grandma Gertrude lived. Vicki's great-uncle Orville and great-aunt Georgette lived there too. But shortly after the holidays from the previous year were over, Uncle Orville and Aunt Georgette were on a trolley in San Francisco celebrating their wedding anniversary, along with Grandpa Wilbur and Grandma Gertrude, when the trolley crashed and both Uncle Orville and Aunt Georgette fell out and landed in the streets dead as possums. "Vicki, we're here," Martin said as he unbuckled her seatbelt. Vicki couldn't wait to see her great-grandparents. When Thanksgiving Day came, Vicki woke up and smelled a couple of turkeys cooking in the oven from her guest room that she was currently sharing with Eddie and Janine. Vicki put on her brown shirt and blue jeans and headed down the stairs to join her family for breakfast. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, Vicki encountered her Uncle Peter, who of course was about to call her down. "Happy Thanksgiving, Uncle Peter," Vicki began. "Happy Thanksgiving, Vicki," Uncle Peter replied as he lifted her into his arms. Vicki remembered her first Thanksgiving when her Uncle Peter used to take her out of her crib and carry her down the stairs where the rest of her family members, including 9-year-old Eddie and 7-year-old Janine, were. Just think, Vicki, in about 9 hours it'll be dinner, and it'll be turkey time, Uncle Peter had said. Vicki had cooed sweetly. And soon it'll all be down in your wee little tummy, Uncle Peter had added. Baby Vicki laughed as she felt her Uncle Peter's fingers gently running across her tiny waist. "Good morning, my little pink monkey," Aunt Lizzie began as she saw her husband carry their favorite niece into the dining room. Eddie and Janine were already seated with their cousins, while Martin and Carol were busy serving the rest of Vicki's family members breakfast. "Happy Thanksgiving, Aunt Lizzie! Happy Thanksgiving, everybody!" Vicki said aloud. "Happy Thanksgiving, Vicki!" all of her relatives replied. Vicki started to fix up her own breakfast with a little help from her Uncle Peter as Carol poured a fresh glass of orange juice. "Thank you, Mummy," Vicki said. "You're welcome, baby," replied Carol as she put on her best grin like a real waitress in any restaurant in the world. Uncle Peter took Vicki to a table where her brother Eddie, sister Janine, and all of her cousins were seated, aside from their aunts, uncles, grandparents, great-grandparents, and parents. "Thank you, Uncle Peter," said Vicki in a cutie pie voice. "You're welcome, my wee little baby princess," replied Uncle Peter in such a voice that Vicki always loved to hear, and it made everyone laugh. Uncle Peter never fails to make everyone, nor his favorite patient and niece, laugh. As Vicki was enjoying her breakfast of scrambled eggs with bits of bacon, cinnamon and raisin toast, a fruit salad of pineapple, watermelon, papaya, mango, cantaloupe, honeydew, and kiwi, and sipping up some fresh squeezed orange juice, she thought of the very first Thanksgiving story she read in school. She learned about the Pilgrims, the Indians, John Alden, Priscilla Millens, and Captain Miles Standish. The Pilgrims must have been thankful for what had happened to them, thought Vicki. William Brewster, the minister, said that we thank God for our homes and our food and our safety in the new land. When Vicki caught sight of her father and mother kissing each other, she pictured them as John Alden and Priscilla Millens kissing on the Mayflower while sailing from the United Kingdom to North America, and there were only 102 passengers on board. "That's more than 100, Vicki thought. Vicki also pictured herself and Johnny Mackenzie on the Mayflower in the Thanksgiving Day play where he played John Alden and she played the part of Priscilla Millens. "So, Vicki," Uncle Peter said, interrupting her thoughts, "are you happy to be here in Malibu with everyone?" "Yes, Uncle Peter," replied Vicki. "I am happy to be here at the beach city in Malibu with all of my family members, even you. But I'm hungry too, just the same." "Good, that's just what I wanted to hear." Uncle Peter grinned as he poured her yet another glass of orange juice. "But do you remember the time I told you that in 9 hours it'll be turkey time?" Vicki looked over her Uncle Peter's shoulder and saw the clock that was shaped like a steering wheel from a ship, and it read 7:15. "Yeah, I remember you telling me that, and you said that it'll all be down in my tummy," Vicki replied as her cheeks turned pink. "That's right," smiled Uncle Peter before letting out another go off. "You know, Uncle Pete," Eddie piped up, "I'm kind of thinking you never fail to make Vicki laugh. Don't you think so, Janine?" "Yeah, Eddie. Uncle Peter always looks for ways to make our baby sister laugh," agreed Janine. "And don't I find ways to make the both of you laugh?" Uncle Peter asked Eddie and Janine. Of course you do, Uncle Peter, Janine answered proudly, before taking another bite of her scrambled eggs and bacon. Good to hear, Janine, Uncle Peter laughed as he patted her gently on the head. Janine laughed through her lips. When everyone finished their breakfast, Carol happily went into the kitchen with Aunt Kumi, Aunt Lizzie, Aunt Pat, and Aunt Tara to cook up the Thanksgiving Day dinner, along with Grandma Ruby and Grandma Opal, while Vicki helped her brother, sister, and cousins decorate the tables for the big Thanksgiving Day dinner. As for Martin, he stayed inside to play poker and watch football at the same time, along with Uncle Jeff, Uncle Peter, Uncle Bob, Uncle Stephen, Grandpa Max, and Grandpa Ned. At 4 o'clock, everyone set the table for Thanksgiving dinner. Vicki, Eddie, and Janine set out all the plates, drinking glasses, and silverware, while the other adults brought out the food and the big punch bowl filled with apple cider. Soon Vicki and her family sat down outside on the beach and ate the food that was prepared for the Thanksgiving Day feast. Turkey, cranberries, mashed potatoes with gravy, sweet potatoes with marshmallows, green bean casserole, classic stuffing, caramelized onion and goat cheese bites, dinner rolls, baked macaroni and cheese, garlic parmesan roasted carrots, cornbread, pumpkin pie, and apple cider. Everyone, even Vicki, had a terrific Thanksgiving Day and enjoyed the delicious food from turkey to pumpkin pie with a dab of whipped cream. When Thanksgiving Day was over, Vicki and her family drove down to Los Angeles and had a super-duper fantastic time at Mitchell Johnson's concert. The singer even came off stage during one of his somber songs, and he hugged very many lucky people in the audience, including Vicki. "I love you, Mitchell," she said tenderly. "I love you too, Vicki," Mitchell replied sweetly. And that is the end of Vicki's Thanksgiving. Thank you so very much for joining me today, everybody. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'll be reading you Vicki's Christmas in my next video. Until then, catch you later and have a happy Thanksgiving!